In November 2023, delegates from over 100 countries gathered in Geneva for the annual meeting of the Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons. The CCW is the international legal forum established in 1980 to prohibit or restrict weapons deemed to cause unnecessary suffering or to strike without distinction. It banned blinding laser weapons in 1995. It placed restrictions on cluster munitions, incendiary weapons, and booby traps. It is the mechanism the international community built to govern the weapons of war. Since 2014, the CCW has been convening a working group specifically to address autonomous weapon systems. Delegates have met every year for a decade. They have produced reports, position papers, and summaries of technical presentations. They have discussed definitions, frameworks, and proposed principles. They have not produced a single binding rule. In November 2023, the meeting ended without consensus, even on a political declaration, a non-binding statement of principles with no enforcement mechanism and no legal force, just a statement. The group could not agree on that. In the same period covered by those 10 years of meetings, the systems documented in this channel moved from concept to prototype to operational deployment. Lavender processed 37,000 names. The Kargu 2 made an autonomous lethal decision in Libya. Project Maven was embedded in active strike operations across 4 continents. AI planning systems compressed the sensor-to-shooter timeline from 20 minutes to 20 seconds. While the world's governments debated definitions in Geneva, the weapons were being used. The failure to regulate autonomous weapons systems is not an accident. It is the result of a deliberate calculation made by the countries that matter most. The United States, China, Russia, the United Kingdom, Australia, and India, the 6 countries whose military AI programs are most advanced, have each, in different ways and with different stated justifications, resisted any binding international agreement on autonomous weapons. The United States' position has been consistent. Existing international humanitarian law is sufficient. Human judgment remains in the loop, and any binding prohibition would disadvantage democratic nations while being ignored by authoritarian ones. The U.S. has also argued that defining meaningful human control in treaty language is premature, that the technology is evolving too fast for static legal definitions. Russia's position has been more direct. Autonomous weapons represent a legitimate military technology, and no prohibition is acceptable. Russia has also argued with some consistency that AI weapons could paradoxically reduce civilian casualties by eliminating the human psychological factors that drive atrocities: fear, anger, revenge. China's position occupies the middle. It has called for a ban on fully autonomous lethal weapons while simultaneously running one of the world's most advanced military AI development programs. The stated ban applies to a category that China's own definitions would exclude most of its systems from. What all 3 major powers share is a structural interest in not being bound. Their military AI programs are operational. A binding prohibition would require dismantling or constraining systems already embedded in their defense architecture. The calculation is straightforward. The advantage of maintaining those systems outweighs the advantage of a global norm that adversaries might ignore anyway. The phrase "no soldier controls" requires precision because it is misunderstood in both directions. It does not mean that no human being is involved in the process. Every system documented in this channel has a human somewhere in its chain: an officer who set the parameters, a commander who authorized a mission, a procurement official who approved the deployment. Those humans exist. They made decisions. What "no soldier controls" means is something more specific. No soldier controls the individual targeting decision at the moment it is made. With Lavender, no officer controlled which 37,000 names the algorithm selected. They controlled whether to act on the output, for 20 seconds per name. With the Kargu 2 in autonomous mode, no soldier controlled which specific person in the target zone the drone identified and struck. They controlled the release of the weapon into an area. With a combat swarm, no soldier controls which of the 1,000 concurrent targeting decisions each drone makes. They control the launch. With AI planning systems, no general controls the courses of action the system generates or the priorities it assigns. They control the final approval, under time pressure, under automation bias, within a system designed to make the AI's recommendation the path of least resistance. The soldier who exists in each of these chains is real, but the soldier's control over the specific lethal decision is nominal. It is structural presence without substantive authority. And international humanitarian law, which requires that a human being exercise genuine judgment over targeting decisions, has no current mechanism for distinguishing between those two things. Not every institution has remained passive. The International Committee of the Red Cross, the body with the longest institutional history in the law of armed conflict, has been increasingly direct in its position. In 2021, the ICRC called for new international rules on autonomous weapons, including prohibitions on systems that select human targets autonomously and on systems that cannot be used in compliance with international humanitarian law. In 2023, it went further, calling for a legally binding instrument, not a political declaration. The Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, a coalition of more than 200 civil society organizations, including Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and the Nobel Women's Initiative, has been calling for a preemptive prohibition treaty since 2013. It has collected endorsements from over 70 governments. Those governments are almost entirely small and middle powers. They are not the countries building the weapons. In 2023, the United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres called for a legally binding agreement on autonomous weapons by 2026, describing the development of machines with the power and discretion to take lives without human involvement as morally repugnant and politically unacceptable. None of these positions have produced a binding instrument. The ICRC does not make law. Civil society coalitions do not make law. Secretary-General declarations do not make law. Law in the international system requires state consent, and the states with the most advanced autonomous weapons programs have not consented. Taken together, the systems documented in this channel create an accountability structure that looks like this. Lavender generated 37,000 names. Officers reviewed each for 20 seconds. The IDF says this constitutes human oversight. No court has ruled otherwise. No officer has been charged. The system remains operational. Project Maven generated targeting assessments used in active strike environments across 4 continents for 8 years. No independent error rate has been disclosed. No officer has described the review process. No investigation has examined the connection between Maven's outputs and specific strikes. The Kargu 2 made an autonomous lethal decision in Libya in March 2020. The UN documented it. No charge has been filed. Turkey has not withdrawn the weapon. The technology has been refined and used in subsequent conflicts. AI planning systems now generate operational plans in seconds, compress the time available for human deliberation to the point where genuine independent evaluation is structurally impossible, and embed into the decision chain a form of automation bias with no agreed legal or ethical standard. In each case, the result is the same. The AI made a consequential decision. A human was nominally present. No one was held responsible for what the AI decided, and no binding rule was created to prevent the same thing from happening again. This is not a gap in enforcement. It is a gap in the law itself. The rules that exist were written before these systems existed. They apply the concept of individual human judgment to processes in which individual human judgment has been systematically removed. The gap between what the law requires and what these systems actually do is not being closed. It is widening. There is a version of this story in which the absence of regulation is temporary, a lag between technology and law that the international community will eventually close, as it has with other weapons technologies. That version is available, but it requires conditions that do not currently exist. Every previous weapons prohibition treaty, chemical weapons, biological weapons, landmines, cluster munitions, was achieved after the weapons produced casualties visible and shocking enough to generate political will for prohibition. The casualties from AI-assisted targeting are not invisible. They are documented in UN reports, in investigative journalism, in the testimonies of officers who describe themselves as rubber stamps. What is invisible is the accountability structure that would convert that documentation into legal consequence. The Chemical Weapons Convention was possible because chemical weapons had a clear physical signature, a clear victim profile, and a clear manufacturing chain that could be inspected and verified. Autonomous weapon systems have none of those properties. An AI targeting decision leaves no distinct physical trace separable from the strike it authorized. The algorithm that made the decision is proprietary. The officers who implemented it are protected by classification. The government that deployed it asserts compliance with existing law. The argument is not that regulation is impossible. It is that the conditions required to produce it, political will from the countries that matter, a verification mechanism, a definition of meaningful human control, are each individually difficult, and all three simultaneously have not yet occurred. The systems described in this channel are not prototypes awaiting deployment. They are operational. They are being used in active conflict environments. Their outputs are connected through chains of varying length and nominal human involvement to people who are alive one moment and dead the next. And as of today, no soldier fully controls any of them. No government has written a law that binds any of them. No court has jurisdiction over what they decide. The next video examines the specific number that sits inside all of this, the margin of error that militaries have acknowledged, applied, and built into their targeting doctrine, not as an accident, as a deliberate parameter, the accepted rate at which an AI targeting system is permitted to be wrong about a human life.